It gives me great pleasure to welcome my good friends Sue Nabeth Moore and Jason Whitehead to Caffeine and Carrots. Sue, Jason, welcome. Sue and Jason have been good friends. They are a pioneer in this industry, have been both proponents and practitioners of customer success for a long time. And recently, they co-founded an initiative called Success Chain, which I really like and we have partnered with as well. And I'll let both Sue and Jason talk about it a little bit. So, Sue, Jason, once more, welcome to Caffeine and Carrots.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. And Sue, maybe we could start with a little bit of an introduction from you. Obviously, a lot of people know you, but still good for you to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. I don't know what they know about me, but okay, thank you. Thank you, Prithvi, for inviting us. We're very honored. And I'll say it again, I love this concept. I love the idea of caffeine and carrots. I love that name. So thank you again. So for people who don't know me, Sue Nabeth Moore, and as you can gather, I'm British and an avid evangelist of customer success. So doing a lot of stuff in Europe to evangelize what customer success is. And yes, you're right. So I had the pleasure of meeting Jason just over 2 years ago. I think it was in London. And yeah, time flies. Is it 3?
Yeah.
So there you go. Time flies when you're having fun, Jason, right? And it's there where we decided to do something together. So we started off 3 years ago with Customer Success Mastermind, which is now evolved to what you mentioned, Success Chain, and which basically is a company which helps customer success leaders and customer success practitioners to actually either initiate their customer success initiatives or to fine tune, because as we know, you just never stop with customer success, right?
Right.
So yes, so I will shut up now and let Jason continue.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Prithvi, thank you so much for having us here. It's been great to partner with you and your organization. It's been a lot of fun, and love the customer success space and everything that's happening here. It's exciting. I've been, as Sue mentioned, we've been working together for a couple of years, and I've been in the user adoption, change management, customer success space for far longer than I care to imagine. But it's been great fun, because a lot of my background early was helping organizations get technology live and get it moving, and then quickly realizing that the challenge was not getting systems deployed, it was getting people to use it in a way that creates value. And most of my professional work has been shifting from, all right, what happens after the system's live to make sure we're getting that value. And it's just been exciting to see how the customer success space has emerged over the past few years and how it's evolving. And I'm really excited to see where it's going to go more in that direction going forward. So I do think that's the big challenge that a lot of organizations face. So thanks for having us, and excited to be here for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, even in the intros both of you gave, there were some cues for us to get into that discussion. You mentioned, Jason, about the change management aspect of it. And I know we discussed this in one of our earlier conversations. And we face it too, that, when you are looking at, for example, even implementing technology into an organization, there is a big aspect of change management involved there. And with or without technology, change management exists either way. You're looking at evolving, and Sue, you mentioned optimizing over time because it never stops, which means even change management doesn't stop. So would you, and jumping the gun a little bit, would you consider change management to be a challenge which is sort of ignored in the industry right now? What are your takes on that?
Sue?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure, go for it.
Yes, I will. Yes, definitely. And I think from 2 aspects, Prithvi. I think the first one, which is overlooked, is the change management aspect of how you're actually getting your customer to adopt their solution, your solution, in their context. Right. And adoption is not just about knowing, what are the features and the functions of the tool to use, but it's how your tool is actually going to be embedded into the business as usual of that company. And that, you can have the simplest tool in the world, but the gap in terms of change management is very high, because that's going to impact the way they are organized, it's going to impact their processes, it's going to impact their routines around business. And I think that gap is often overlooked, underestimated, or completely ignored, right? that's the first thing on the customer side. And I'll let Jason, you jump in onto that as well. And I think the other aspect of change management, which is overlooked, is on the vendor side. And that is that, when you're putting customer success into place, it's not just about another operational function, but it is really something which is very transformational within your company, because it's going to run through the veins of the whole company. And it should come top down. So that takes a lot of change management effort in order to make sure that customer success becomes the mantra of the company.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think, especially as it relates to the buyer side of getting people to use technology differently, there's still some big fundamental misconceptions about what is change management. People are like, oh, training. Oh, we'll just do a little bit of communication to tell them what they need to go. And it's much more advanced than that if you're going to do it well. Because ultimately, I think people forget that at a fundamental level, technology is an enabler of letting people do their jobs differently. It changes, it automates some work, it removes some work, it adds new things that have to happen. But the whole point is to get everyone to do their job differently, using the tool to achieve a better outcome than they can without it. And a lot of folks say, oh, well, if we teach them how to navigate the tool, the rest will just come. And that's really not the case. I think another challenge, and you talked about this too, like with the constant evolution of software and tools, is a lot of change management methodologies were really built prior to the world of SaaS. And a lot of change management was how do we do a corporate merger? How do we do a restructure? We're going from the old way to the new way, and it's sort of a one-off point in time change. And with the world of SaaS and quick releases and all that great stuff, it's really, as I described it, it's changed the learning curve into a learning treadmill. And unless you have an ongoing effort to really get people to say, this is what's shifting now, this is what's new this week, this is how we all need to do our jobs differently every week. If you're not constantly working on that and moving forward that, both the message, but also the underlying support to processes and incentives and everything else, you're going to quickly fall behind. And frankly, I just think a lot of organizations don't realize the effort required and the methods to do that, which is a real shame and a real challenge.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, change management within your own organization at times itself becomes a significant challenge. And now when you're looking at how do you influence change management within your customers' processes, it obviously is a far bigger challenge. So how do you actually go about influencing that? As a software vendor, you obviously want your customer also to adopt the ongoing change management philosophy, as you mentioned. How do you go about doing that?
I think there's a few things too. And one is even during the sales process, identifying them, what is their capacity to drive change and success in their own organization? Do they have experience in this? Do they have methods? Do they have a team or the resources available to help do this? And if not, how do you fill that gaps? And then I think part of it is all of your discussions need to focus on, right, how do we make sure what are the steps and actions that need to happen in your organization to make sure 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to get that value that you want, and you're going to keep getting it year after year. Let's have some discussions around what you need to do from a change perspective and how we as a vendor can support you. And I think one of the fundamentals is that if they don't understand change or have that capacity in their organization, you've really got to help enable that for them or get them to those ahas like, oh, if we don't do this, we're going to be in trouble. And it's not about the system is hard to adopt. It's about our organizational capacity to adopt it.
Yeah.
So,
and just to add to that as well, I think that's part of the role of the customer success manager to actually give guidelines as to what they can do in order to enable that change management, right? And I think that's something which you can enrich over time. You don't just go in there and after your first month, you've got a whole full-blown change management program into place. Yeah. It's something which you as a customer success frontliner can learn what are the best practices around that. And you can actually provide that as part of your service offering. That is something which you as a customer success organization can either include in what you're doing, and that will be a differentiator for you as a customer success group. Or, I've even seen where people are actually having that as part of their professional services, which is a paid service in addition, especially for the high touch ones, But there again, and this is the ongoing conversation that we're having with Jason. And we say that, in order for customer success to really take off, it takes two to tango.
Yes.
So you cannot rely that it's just, even if you have the best white glove service from the customer success vendor side, then you need to make sure that your customer understands that they are accountable.
Yeah.
And in order for that to happen, you have to educate them on what that accountability looks like and how they can help themselves to reach success with change management, right?
Right. No, very good. Very good. I think very interesting and very relevant points. On that note, I did notice on your website a related term, and I'll bring that up. I saw you mention sustainable adoption, so which was very interesting to me because most people look at adoption in isolation and say it's a one-time activity. So obviously, sustainable adoption is something which is the hard truth that you need to continuously keep improving like everything else there. So what's your take there? Why does it have to be sustainable, and what does sustainable mean? How do you define sustainable?
Yes. Do you want me to go, or are you going, Jason?
Yeah, go for it.
Who goes in first?
We'll take turns.
Yeah. It really is. It kind of echoes from what Jason was saying earlier, right? Because when you're in software, because it's so fast paced, and by definition, we're not in the, I remember 20 years ago, that's showing my age now a bit, Prithwi, but I remember 20 years ago, when we're having on-premise software. And, it took probably 6 months, 12 months, even more before we could have an upgrade of whatever version it was. But now it's so fast paced that, a lot of software companies, every month they have a new release. So that in itself means that in terms of adoption, then you're going to make sure that your customers are aware of what are the new features which they need to adopt into their business environments. And their own business environments are fast-paced as well. They're changing all the time. So what we have to do is to meet forces between you as a vendor and your fast-paced product evolution and the evolution of your customers' own environments, right? And you have to make sure there's a match there all the time. So this notion of sustainable adoption is really all about that, and I think, the fact that we do have software which is evolving all the time means, again, that I think people perceive software as an easy option because it is changing over time so quickly. And therefore, they still neglect this, let's say, more difficult aspect and less tangible aspect, which is the change management. So they just think, wow, the software is quick, so everything else needs to be quick, right? And they don't take a step back to think, what do I need to do in terms of the fundamentals about my organization and processes? And that's the hard bit. So they do all the easy bits and forget about the hard bits, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you even say, why do we even have customer success as a profession? Why did this come into play? And the reality is it's because customers are not very good at getting value from technology on their own. And if they could do it on their own, there'd be no need for customer success whatsoever, because they'd automatically get value, they'd automatically renew because they achieve and perceive it. So I think it's really the job of customer success teams to have these discussions around, as we even say, what would it look like if you went to your customer and said to them right up front, like, look, we want you to be a customer for 20 years or more. And we know the only way that's going to happen is if you get so much value from using our system that you're going to want to keep renewing and use more. Let's talk about how we get there. And I think that's the whole idea, Sue mentioned too, peaks and valleys. You have staff turnover, you have changes in the regulatory environment, new competitors. The world is constantly changing, the context is changing, and you've got to keep your activities up to make sure you're addressing all of those needs. And most organizations just don't think about that. They think about how do we evolve our product, but they don't think about how do we evolve our internal adoption.
Correct. And within the adoption space itself, point in time, what I have also seen across different experiences is that definition itself varies from organization to organization. Some will simply treat it at the very simplest level of just login. Are people logging in? And that's adoption. Okay, done. And that's obviously not the right way to look at it. Some would say, okay, log in and use, feature A, B, C, D. My take on this always has been that the concept of value is very different or adjacent to concept of adoption. They are obviously related to each other, but they still have to be treated differently. You may have significant usage of your platform. you may still not be able to provide value, right? Or the value perception may be very low. So those are two different things. We'll come to the value piece. So on adoption, what is the basic right way, according to both of you, to define adoption for a software firm? Obviously, it cannot be just login. Then what should it be?
So in my perspective, it's adoption really is about, are people using the tool as intended, as designed, as part of their daily work? That doesn't mean you have to use every module every day, because there may be some functions that you perform quarterly or annually or whatever it may be. But are you using it in a way that's going to create that value, that you're doing it the right way? One of the challenges we often see, so like if you're talking about a CRM system, if the sales folks don't put in the information that the service people need, the service people are unable to do their job well, even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
If the service people don't put the right information in, someone else can't do. The marketing people may not have the information they need to use that same data for other purposes. And I see time and time again where folks are just so narrowly, how do I do the little bit that I need to do and what I'm rewarded and incentivized for, that they miss the connections across the organization. So I do think that there's a piece of that. How you use the system is just as important as how often or how well you use it. And are you doing it in a way that enables others to do their job across the organization? So I think those are very key. And then I think where a lot of organizations also struggle is there someone who has visibility across all of this to say, all right, people are using the technology, but are we creating value from it? And are we doing the right things with that? And I think that's a very different discussion. And as we talk about often, adoption's on the critical path to success and value, but it's not the end all and be all. You don't just stop at the adoption metrics. It's Sue, what's your thought?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think there are different variants of what people understand by this word adoption. And I agree with you, Prithwi. It goes beyond, just pressing on a few functions and buttons and bells and whistles, right? And I think it's part of the customer success role to help the customer define what adoption should look like with their teams. And that should include elements which go beyond the tool. So it can even include how you're going to use your tool within the environment. So how you're going to use the tool within your process, or the processes which are around that particular adoption of the tool, right? And that's something which you as a customer success manager can help your customer to understand, to verbalize, and to measure with their teams. And you give them a dashboard or some kind of reporting system which enables them to measure that, and not just how many times you've logged into this function and this feature, right? So for me, adoption is more than that. And for Jason's second point, we often talk about value, and you mentioned, Prithvi, you wanted to deep dive into a little bit more about that. And we have our methodology around that, which we call AM/PM. Which is morning and afternoon, and we're saying AM is adoption measurement and PM is performance measurement. And what we try and encourage is for customers to first of all say, what do they want to measure in terms of performance? They give some kind of KPI, some kind of metric, where they are now, where they want to get to. And then we're going to do some retro engineering based on that performance of what that means in terms of adoption. So the AM, the adoption measurement,
right.
And that adoption measurement can be anything from what they should be doing in the tool, but also what they should be doing outside of the tool to embed that tool into their process.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So staying on adoption for a little bit, very relevant what you mentioned. And I also think, paraphrasing a little bit of what both of you said, whichever way you define it, the adoption, it still will boil down to some amount of usage. That part we get. And even as a platform, I think today Smart Carrot captures that. I think what we feel good about is our ability to actually capture it by persona, because you mentioned, one of you, I guess, that different roles will use your tool differently. So the adoption needs to be looked at in that context. If it's a reporting module, it's not necessary it gets used every day. But if the right executives are using it at the right time in the right frequency, you probably can claim adoption, even if the login is still once a quarter or once a month. That's fine.
Yeah.
So it's always in the context of that. And if there is a day-to-day practitioner, then you probably need them to log in every day and use more modules and more features. So the by persona piece becomes important. And not too many people actually understand and do it. I don't know what your experience has been, but I think people are, at least the Smart Carrot customers, use the persona-based drivers fairly regularly, and we're very proud of that. On the value piece, I think, Sue, wonderful framework, the AM, PM, and the PM is probably more oriented towards outcomes, is what I got.
Yes.
Which is really the KPIs. So you're driving the outcome. Again, is it relevant, because outcomes for different roles will be different, and we know that the philosophy of what's in it for me exists in human beings. So
Sure.
So everyone will look at what's the outcome benefit to me. So again, if it's a CX layer, then it's a different outcome. If it's a practitioner, it's a different. You think that's a good way to look at how you drive the value concept and adoption concept?
Absolutely. And, I couldn't agree with you more, Prithwi. The persona, that I'm a biggest fan of, having a persona approach.
Yeah.
And even the AM/PM is something which we encourage our customers to use per persona. And so with persona, what we mean is you identify the users of your tool based on their needs, based on their pain points. And the personas, you can actually define what I call, what is commonly known in the customer experience world as jobs to be done.
Yeah.
So based on the jobs to be done, you identify, okay, what do I need to guide my customers to do within the tool based on the 2 or 3 top jobs which they need to do based on their persona.
Yeah.
And that's how you then measure with the AM/PM methodology which we use. And you can have, what's great about that is it means you can start to scale, because it means that every time you have a new type of persona coming on board, you can ask the questions, you can identify, do some mapping and find out, what are their needs, what are the jobs to be done, and then you can guide them to what it takes in that tool to adopt it and beyond within their processes, right?
Wonderful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jason, anything to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things. One of the questions that I often ask clients when we first come in there is, whose job is it at the senior level to make sure that people are using the system and you're getting value? And when do they do this? 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road after go live? And typically when we ask that question, like, oh, well, no one. And so it's like, you're spending all this money, but you're not actually making sure that you're getting value from it. That's kind of a challenge here. Let's address that. And then when we go through, you mentioned the "what's in it for me" message, and I think that's one that is often commonly used. And what I've actually had much better results with is a different message, which is along the idea of sharing to people what worked for you and made you successful in this organization yesterday no longer applies. Yeah. Here's what's changing, and here's what it takes for you to be successful going forward. And then breaking that down, I think, into your persona piece, and here's how we're going to measure that, and here's what it means for you to be successful using the tool to do your job differently and to achieve different outcomes. And I think you absolutely need to break those down by personas, by departments, by whatever it is, based on the level of usage expected and the impact that they're supposed to have based on the nature of the technology and where it needs to go. And most people sort of skip over that and just focus on it's going to make your life easier and faster. No, you're going to take away some work so I can do some other work somewhere else. Let's say, am I doing the right stuff now? So I think that's a big shift that people need to make.
Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful discussion ongoing, and I'd love to continue here almost at the top of our mark. So let me ask you this as potentially our last query to both of you. Over the last 6 months, 1 year, obviously challenging times for the industry, but also opportunities as well. And going ahead for the customer success fraternity, as you look at all the adoption and change management challenges which you help solve, what is the biggest challenge you think the industry faces right now?
Sue, do you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, well, I think right now it really is that. I think we're talking about change management more and more, and I think that the challenge is we all are aware that we need to do it, but it's how to scale doing change management. If you're a customer success manager and you have hundreds of customers, then you can't possibly be holding the hands of every single customer. It's not possible. So we need to find a way of scaling that. So it can be something which we can, in terms of solutions, we can start to integrate into the services that we are enveloping around what we're doing. It can be something which is part of the product itself, product-led growth. And you can have actually some kind of facility within the product itself. What we're doing as well with Success Chain is to actually encourage the education of customers so that customers know what it takes for them to be able to become autonomous in driving their own change management. So that's our solution. That's our personal solution, I would say. But I think in terms of change management, I think everybody's aware of it. A lot of us are talking about it, but it's very difficult to implement. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this past year and a half has really taught people that there's a lot of opportunity to pivot how we do our jobs and what we need to do in person, what we need to do differently. And I think people are starting to realize it does require a lot of time and coordination to figure out how do we make this work seamlessly across all of our operations and where does it need to go. And I think people are realizing if you don't have that in place and if you don't have an infrastructure for ongoing change and for being able to pivot quickly, you're going to be behind the eight ball. So I think more organizations, especially customer success, need to have that expertise in change and adoption and how to build that sustainable, scalable infrastructure that's just not there right now. And I think, there's also change can be challenging for some people and it requires a certain amount of risk to be that facilitator and driver of change. And there's going to be some people who are not too thrilled with having to go to their experience with it. And you've got to be pretty strong and comfortable in that role. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I was just going to add to that and I think within the last year and a half and the impact of COVID, that's accelerated, there are stats which say, in the last year, we've accelerated digital transformation by 5 years, So it's a situation which has been disruptive and which has thrust us into a situation where we've just had to accelerate our adaptation to change, right? And I think that's an opportunity for us customer success folks, because we are agents of digital transformation, right? We're agents of change, really. That's what we're doing, right? So I think it's a promising situation for us to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and in the past year, it's been a very reactive change driven by necessity, and I think now going forward, it's more of how do we optimize it for efficiency and for success, which is a great opportunity.
Yes, absolutely.
No, wonderful. I think it's challenging times, but as I said earlier, there are a lot of opportunities also. So we are all very excited about it. So thank you, Sue and Jason, so much for your time. This was very insightful, and I hope it was insightful to all the audience who listens into this as well. We are very proud of our partnership with Success Chain, and hopefully our customers and prospects will see more of Success Chain in the Smart Carrot ecosystem going ahead. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and we'll continue this discussion some other time. Wonderful.
Can't wait. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prithwi.
Cheers.
Thank you.